Welcome back to the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm your host, John Kuzma. This is a Super Bowl recap edition of the latest episode of Football Game Tonight. And we're going to talk about why the Eagles won the Super Bowl in this game. To me, the Eagles were able to win the Super Bowl because they had better young talent than the Chiefs. You look at the Eagles roster, you got Jordan Davis and Cooper DeJean, who were outstanding in that Super Bowl. They also have guys like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell. When you look across the board, it's pretty easy to see that the Eagles had better young talent than the Chiefs. And I know the Chiefs were on the cusp of a dynasty. They had won 3 Super Bowls throughout their time, with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid teaming up. But you look at the core players that the Chiefs have, guys like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and they're all older veteran players, whereas the Eagles have done a really good job of hitting big on their draft picks in these recent draft years. So when you get into this Super Bowl matchup and you have all this young blood on the Eagles roster that are extremely talented, guys that we mentioned, Jordan Davis, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, those guys had a huge impact in this game. You look at the Cooper DeJean pick six, a guy who steps up, who we all knew coming out of Iowa was a really good player, slips a little bit in the draft and then gets a chance to make his mark and does it on the biggest stage in the Super Bowl with the pick six. Not only, intercepting the pass, but finding a way to finish that play in the end zone. Such a huge play for the Eagles defense, and you could just see the excitement on the Eagles sideline when Cooper DeJean made that play. They knew they were in business, and they knew that Cooper DeJean was a big-time player that is going to stick around for a long time and make a lot more big plays for this football team. He proved it in the Super Bowl, and there's no bigger stage than that, like I said. Jordan Davis, a guy that did really good work in the trenches, getting after it. And if you go back and watch that game, Patrick Mahomes did not have any time to scan the field. That was one of the biggest reasons the Eagles won this game, is because the Chiefs' offensive line was collapsing as soon as Patrick Mahomes was able to catch the snap. And when you're running for your life and you can't get nothing off and you're getting flushed out of the pocket and the play's breaking down and now you're just kind of freelancing out on the perimeter, it's hard to win games like that. The Chiefs are such a scripted football team. They design great plays with Andy Reid. They implement them and they execute them better than basically any team in the NFL. That's what they do well. But when you have an Eagles defensive line with guys like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, two of these young superstars on the defensive side of the ball, you saw what happened in that game, to that Chiefs offensive line. Patrick Mahomes is running around for his life. The receivers have to adjust their routes and work back to the quarterback. It just doesn't execute as well. The rhythm and timing of the plays gets thrown off, and the whole play overall just gets disrupted. It's hard to win when your offensive line is breaking down, and now your whole focus as a quarterback is, I need to escape the pressure. Now you have to play from wherever you're getting flushed out at. And a lot of times the routes just aren't in that area because the routes are designed pre-snap to go to different areas of the field, and it just doesn't work out. That's exactly what we saw in the Super Bowl because guys like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis were just eating up that offensive line of scrimmage and blowing those offensive linemen into the offensive backfield. Just not much time there for Patrick Mahomes at all. Forget getting to the second or the third read. He was focused on that first read as soon as the snap hit his hands. And if it wasn't there, it was basically a sack for the Eagles because they were just getting a ton of pressure, particularly in the first half. Late in the second half, the Chiefs started to settle down a little bit, but by then, the game was basically out of reach. So a really good start to the game by that Eagles defensive front. Josh Sweat deserves a lot of praise. Brandon Graham came back. Those guys got after it. They dominated the line of scrimmage. And that's another big reason the Eagles were able to win this football game. And, like I said, I was talking about, comparing the Eagles' young talent that they have to the Chiefs' older players, Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones, their old core players. The Chiefs haven't done as good of a job as the Eagles at hitting on their draft picks. You look at the guys that the Chiefs have hit on. Xavier Worthy was good in the Super Bowl. I know Rashee Rice was out. But outside of those two guys, Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, the Chiefs have not done a good enough job at, injecting that young talent into their DNA, whereas the Eagles did a really good job of that because they're stacked with young players. And you look at guys like Devontae Smith, he's not that old either. So it's not just the collection of talent that the Eagles have on the defensive side of the ball, although clearly they were focused on, revamping the defensive side of the ball by nailing all these young draft picks on their defense, which panned out for the Eagles in the end. Very smart move by Howie Roseman to go and focus on defense with most of those recent draft picks. Clearly that paid off for them. So really good work by Howie Roseman and the front office of the Eagles, the scouting department. Everybody seemed to do their job because there's no way these people are failing at doing their job if so many of these draft picks not only panned out, but were big contributors for this football team. It seemed like everybody, chipped in and played a part, whether it was throughout the season getting this team to the Super Bowl, and then you have the huge gains from Jordan Davis and Cooper DeJean in the Super Bowl. So really good work. And, even though Jalen Carter, maybe the stats don't jump out at you, maybe Nolan Smith, the stats don't jump out at you in the Super Bowl, but you better believe that they had great pursuit in that game. Jalen Carter getting off blocks, Nolan Smith coming off the edge with the speed. We all go back to the NFL Combine when we saw Nolan Smith be a Combine superstar because of the speed that he has. He did a good job of getting off the edge, getting a jump, turning the corner, and getting in the backfield in that Super Bowl as well. So maybe not the huge gains from Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the Super Bowl, but they were still able to make an impact by beating their man, whether it was getting off blocks or getting off the edge. So they definitely were impactful despite the fact that it didn't really show up on the stat sheet. Reason number 2 that the Eagles won the Super Bowl was they also have a great collection of talent on the offensive side of the ball. You look at A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, then the addition of Saquon Barkley. They are really good on this offense. A.J. Brown bullied the Chiefs cornerbacks in this game. Devontae Smith goes deep to put the dagger in the Chiefs. Those guys both rose to the occasion on the biggest stage. They were really good. And, even before Saquon Barkley got there, it was so much about A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They were helping bring Jalen Hurts along. When this team, transitions from Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts and Jalen Hurts steps in, a big reason Jalen Hurts has been able to speed up his development and become a really good quarterback in the National Football League. And a guy who really performed well in the Super Bowl. He really stepped up. And even going back to the last time these two teams faced off in the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts was really good in that game too. But a big reason that Jalen Hurts gets to execute the way he does is because he does have such good weapons on the perimeter in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, two guys that would make most quarterbacks in the National Football League look really good just because they're so talented out wide. A.J. Brown, the big, strong receiver. I think about him, making the play near the end zone or near the sidelines and then getting in the end zone. Devontae Smith going deep. I think it was on the play action pass. He goes deep and takes the top off the defense. A really good job by them that kind of suck the life out of the Chiefs just because they weren't able to run with Devontae Smith. And after getting beat up for most of the game and then having Devontae Smith take the top off the defense, it's just so deflating for a team. And you could just see the Chiefs in that game. They were flat. And one of the worst things a team can be, whether it's Pee-wee, high school, JV, varsity, college, pro, one of the worst things you can be as a football team is flat. Flat means your team has no life on the sidelines. There's no emotion. Everybody's quiet. They're flat. And to see the Kansas City Chiefs flat in the Super Bowl, it's been a long time since we've seen that. But that's because the Eagles went in there and punched their lights out, did a really good job. So much praise has to go to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, because those guys balled out in this game, delivered the goods for the Eagles offense. And for the two guys that were, the lifeblood of the Eagles offense before Saquon Barkley got there, I think it was kind of fulfilling for their story to see them go out in that Super Bowl the way they did, because before Saquon Barkley got there, it was all about A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And then they stepped up in that Super Bowl and proved, hey, we're still those guys. Neither one of us has fallen off. And in fact, we're going to be two of the biggest contributors in this Super Bowl. And that went a long way towards winning that game. They were great. They both got in the end zone. And you can see why they're perhaps the best, one of the best receiver tandems in the league. You look around the league, I like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. T. Higgins might be out of there now with the Bengals, but I like the Vikings receivers, Jefferson, and, the guys they have over there. There's some really good receiver tandems in this league, but, Bengals, Vikings, they stand out, but A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith just won a Super Bowl. So put them up there with the very best. They certainly deserve it, and they balled out in that Super Bowl. I thought Jalen Hurts also did a really good job in this game of moving the chains with his feet. With the defense so focused on Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley got a heavy workload. They were feeding Saquon Barkley, but so much of Steve Spagnuolo's game plan was, hey, in order for us to win this game, we have to take Saquon Barkley out of the game. If Saquon Barkley runs wild, we have no chance of winning this game. So Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense put so much focus and so much of their game plan went into stopping Saquon Barkley that it was so crucial that Jalen Hurts kept escaping the pocket, then picking up big first downs with his feet. Because, when a team is so focused on the running back because he's the best running back in the league, someone else has to find a way to counter that. And I thought Jalen Hurts did a really good job in this game because he would be in the pocket, scanning the field, and he kept deciding, hey, I'm going to tuck this thing and run. If you guys are giving me a little bit of daylight, why don't I beat you with my feet and provide another weapon for this offense, which he did by tucking the football and running it. So I think that was crucial for the Eagles in this game. You look at Patrick Mahomes, he wasn't able to do that. A lot of times Patrick Mahomes does scramble by time, then find a receiver downfield. He wasn't able to do that. But, Jalen Hurts did it a little bit different. He was scrambling to run. And we've always known him to be a great runner going back to Alabama, Oklahoma. With the Eagles, he's always been a guy that has been able to beat teams with his feet. A great athlete, a guy that is mobile, that can get on the run and, dish out some punishment. More with his elusiveness, but still, as a defense, you're getting slashed by a quarterback. After, you're dropping into coverage, you think you have good coverage. You think, you got the receivers clamped down a little bit, and then the quarterback steps up in the pocket, takes off, and moves the chains, especially on those third downs. It's so deflating for a defense because you're like, I thought we were getting off the field, and then this guy tucks it, finds a crease, takes off, moves the sticks, and then the offense is staying on the field. The defense is getting more tired. Morale's dropping for the defense. They're getting frustrated. They can't get off the field. It's those little things in the momentum of a football game that can cause a team to collapse. And I think that's what happened with the Chiefs defense in this game, because Jalen Hurts kept taking off, kept finding daylight, kept getting out of those maybe longer down and distances, or getting out of third down and keeping the offense on the field. Those were game changers in this football game for the Eagles offense. So Jalen Hurts stepping up with his legs to kind of offset the focus that was on Saquon Barkley. I think that was another crucial piece to the puzzle in this win for the Eagles, because if you clamp down on Saquon Barkley and you clamp down on Jalen Hurts' ability to run, now, they're getting more stops on defense if you're the Chiefs, and the Eagles are coming to the sideline with their head hanging a little bit. That didn't happen in this game. They kept their lifeblood flowing by picking up those first downs because Jalen Hurts was so good at running the football in this game. Another thing you really had to applaud the Eagles in this game for is the fact that they were able to dominate this football game from start to finish. They took it to the Chiefs, then they kept their foot on the gas. And it's been a long time since we've seen the Kansas City Chiefs look like a deer in the headlights, especially in the Super Bowl. They've been able to dominate most of these Super Bowls and come through with, these big wins that they've had. I know the Bucks beat them, and I know they were in a little bit of a dogfight against the 49ers, I think the first time they played the 49ers, and it wasn't an easy game against the 49ers in, the last Super Bowl either, not this latest one, but you know what I mean. They were able to pull out these wins in these Super Bowls because Andy Reid's so good at making adjustments. You look at, the Eagles, the first time that the Chiefs played the Eagles played the Chiefs, I guess you can say, I was really impressed by the Eagles defense heading into that Super Bowl, where I was kind of worried that the Chiefs would not be able to match up with that Eagles defensive line. But Andy Reid made really good adjustments, and the Chiefs won at the line of scrimmage and were able to hold up against that really good Eagles defensive line. In this Super Bowl, it was the totally opposite. It was the total opposite. Basically, the Eagles dominated at the line of scrimmage. The young guys that they brought in gave this defensive line a little more punch. They packed a little more punch in this latest Super Bowl. So that's really the story from the Eagles and Chiefs first Super Bowl to the Eagles and Chiefs second Super Bowl. And the funny thing is, the Eagles defensive line in that first Super Bowl was really, really good, but somehow the Chiefs won at the line of scrimmage. In this Super Bowl, Eagles come in with another really good defensive front, but the Eagles win at the line of scrimmage. Can you see the difference in those two games? In the first Super Bowl, the Chiefs win at the line of scrimmage. In the second Super Bowl, the Eagles win at the line of scrimmage. So by winning at the line of scrimmage, by putting all that pressure on Patrick Mahomes, that was a huge deciding factor in this game. And, they dominate early on because the Eagles' defensive front was so good. They keep their foot on the gas. They really take it to the Chiefs. And by the time that the Chiefs were able to kind of settle into this game, there was 2 minutes left in the third quarter. It's almost impossible to dig yourself out of that kind of hole. You're starting to settle in and find your rhythm with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. You're basically at the start of the fourth quarter by the time you start to kind of get it going. And when you've been dominated for 3 quarters, you're not going to dig yourself out of that hole. Tom Brady versus the Falcons? That's a miracle, though. That's a miracle, and to me, the Eagles dominated this game more than the Falcons were dominating that game. The Eagles were just all over the Chiefs. They were suffocating, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, their game plan, Steve Spagnuolo. It didn't matter. The Eagles were kicking all their asses. That's just the reality of the situation. And you have to give the Eagles credit for being motivated to play. They were motivated to play in that game. Their coaching staff got the most out of their players. And Andy Reid and his coaching staff did not get the most out of their players. So that praise has to go back to Nick Sirianni because he got his guys ready to go in this football game. And in a game where they've already faced this team the last time they went to the Super Bowl, and the Chiefs won that game, it's easy to come in a little bit timid, maybe being a little nervous because last time around it didn't go well. That wasn't the case for the Eagles at all. They came in like, we're getting our revenge. This is payback because we should have won last time. That's the feeling I had in this Super Bowl, that this time we're not going to leave any doubt that we're not only the better team, we're leaps and bounds better than you are. That's why the Super Bowl wasn't close at all. It was a complete annihilation by the Eagles to a team that was pretty much a dynasty in the National Football League. And the gap between these two teams, it was not close in this game. The Eagles were on another level in this football game because not only because of the talent, because we've seen plenty of teams, even Eagles teams in the past, like an Eagles dream team that didn't even, shape up into a good football team. We've seen it before. We've seen plenty of teams around the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. We've seen plenty of teams stacked with talent, loaded with talent, that didn't shape up into good football teams when push come to shove because they don't gel and they're not motivated to play. That wasn't the case with these Eagles. That wasn't the case because Nick Sirianni is an emotional guy that can bring something special out of his players. He's a guy that doesn't shy away from his emotions. He's a guy that taps into his emotions. He likes to play with a chip on his shoulder. He likes to dig deep and tap into what he's feeling and use that to motivate his guys. That's who Nick Sirianni is. He's a guy that, has been around football, played college football. I believe he played at Mount Union. So a guy that, has a passion for football, has always loved the game, has played it since he was a kid, understands the game, and maybe most importantly for this Eagles team, a guy that understood that going into this game against a team that is a dynasty, he had to find a way to motivate his players better than Andy Reid did. Andy Reid's a great X and O's guy. He designs plays. It's about execution. It's about rhythm and timing. That's Andy Reid's strengths. But Nick Sirianni is about digging deep. He's about making sure his guys run through a brick wall for him. That's what the Eagles players did in this Super Bowl. There was nothing in the tank. They left it all out on the field. When you lose the Super Bowl and you feel like I could have did a little bit more or I left a little bit in the tank, it doesn't feel good because you didn't leave it all out on the field. That wasn't the case this time around. They left it all out on the field. They gave everything they had. Every single player on that team from top to bottom went all out. And that's the best compliment you can give Nick Sirianni because he got his guys up and ready to play. They were motivated. They were hungry in this football game. There was no backing down. There was no shying away or being timid. They didn't care that they were playing the Chiefs. They said, we're better than you, and we're going to show the world tonight. That's all that matters. We're going to show the world. We're not going to leave it in the ref's hands. we're not going to leave it close so Patrick Mahomes can have a late game drive and ruin our Super Bowl dreams. They took all that out of the equation because Nick Sirianni tapped into something special in this football team. He delivered the goods as a coach. He stepped up and made sure he got the very best out of his players. That's what you need to do when you're coaching in the Super Bowl and when you're coaching in the National Football League. Now I like where this team is at as a team. They're loaded with young talent. They have a coach that has a Super Bowl win. He's going to gain even more confidence. He's going to trust himself even more. He knows that he can lean into himself. He can lean into himself and do the things that he does best as a coach because he has even more confidence now that he has that Super Bowl World Championship title around his belt. He's the champ. He did it. He backed it up. So for Nick Sirianni, I like the direction he's going as a coach. People had a problem with him. Early on in this season, remember when Devontae Smith was hurt. There was other injuries. I think wasn't A.J. Brown a little banged up too? Like, I know Devontae Smith was for sure hurt. What he missed? He missed a handful of games. People were hammering Nick Sirianni like, is this guy good enough to coach in the NFL? It's like the Eagles were struggling a little bit early on because they had these injuries. They had players that weren't even playing, key players. Their best offensive players are out of the game, and people are banging on the table saying Nick Sirianni isn't good enough. Well, what coach is going to win when two of their best offensive players are banged up? It's just not going to happen. And then he comes back and at the end of the season wins the Super Bowl and silence all those critics. All those critics have to zip their mouth. And that first time around, people were saying, is Nick Sirianni the right guy for the job? Because remember, during the national anthem, he's crying on the sidelines, tears pouring down his face. Like I said earlier, the guy's an emotional guy, but he channels that emotions into coaching this team, and he silenced all the critics at the end of the season by winning the Super Bowl. So you have to applaud Nick Sirianni for what he was able to do. I think he stepped up and, just got the job done for this Eagles team. So we could be seeing another dynasty in the making because if these Eagles draft picks keep panning out like this and Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, those guys are clearly getting an A+ grade as a general manager and a head coach. Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, it seems like they have their ducks in a row when you go from top owner, general manager, head coach, the staff, the trainers. Everybody has an A+ grade right now. The scouting department, A++, nailing on these draft picks. If they keep nailing on these draft picks, you're looking at a team that could keep getting better. And that's scary for the rest of the National Football League because this is a team that is just dominant right now. Everybody's happy and feeling good because they're winning and the results of everything they put into this thing are starting to show. So I like the direction this team's heading. They're going to be right there again next year, and that's because everybody did their job. They did it really well. I'm John Kuzma. Thank you for tuning in to the Football Game Tonight podcast. You can check us out wherever podcasts are found. And that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm signing off.